In search of a visual hammer. Now, I was captivated by the ideas in the book Visual Hammer, Nail Your Brand into the Mind with the Emotional Power of a Visual by Laura Rice when I read the book back in 2013. I immediately saw the power that a visual hammer would offer a brand. So I had a designer create a bull icon and added it to the As Rice logo. This is what it looked like when it had been added. Now, the branding had gone various tweaks since 2006 when it was initially designed. For example, we'd added a new tagline, easy legal, not legalese, in capital letters, which perhaps didn't go with the font of the original logo. So I realized that the logo was looking messy by now. And when a designer approached me suggesting she refresh my brand, I agreed it was time to rethink the logo. I did say I wanted a visual hammer, and I don't know how it happened, but I emerged from the rebrand without a visual hammer. Despite the branding changing completely, I had been unwilling to change the name As Rice when this was suggested because I'd been using it for nearly 10 years. As all the existing brand elements were discarded, including the tagline, easy legal, not legalese, which was a registered trademark, in favour of a new logo, tagline and colours, I was really looking back on it. It's surprising that the designer hadn't found a basis to design a visual hammer into the brand. This is what the new branding looked like. You see, I tend to defer to professionals' greater knowledge about their discipline when I engage someone, so I naturally accepted the designer's greater insight on branding, even though I didn't really understand why the logo needed to be designed in a way that didn't provide a basis for a visual hammer. I just assumed the designer knew best what type of logo I should have and agreed that the visual hammer ideas she did try didn't suit that particular logo. Since then, I've actually discovered a lot about branding and marketing thanks to reading widely around the subject, particularly during the research for my new book, Brand Tuned, The New Rules of Branding, Strategy and Intellectual Property. I've also learned about the importance of actually reining in designers whose tendency to discard the old in favour of the completely new when rebranding is very noticed by people like Jenni Romaniuk in her book. It's not just me saying it. And actually it could do more harm than good because such changes tamper with people's memory structures. Jenni Romaniuk's book, Building Distinctive Brand Assets, explains in detail how people notice brands and why, therefore, it's important to be respectful of brand assets and resist the temptation to fiddle with these assets once they're established. If we get bored with our branding, that is not a good reason to rebrand. It's all about whether we've built up mental availability in the market with those brand assets. Interestingly, she cites the example of Tropicana, whose redesigned visual to be more premium resulted in the oranges in their boxes being dropped. Now, while the new design certainly created a more upmarket look, it also resulted in the loss of a ton of sales. The design team had done some research before changing the branding, but their research had focused on the wrong questions. Instead of establishing how famous and unique the oranges on the packaging were, they had focused on whether the absence of the oranges gave the packaging a more premium look. Reading Jenni Romaniuk's book rekindled my interest in adding a visual hammer for my branding. I was keen to take advantage of the fact that we made various changes to the Azrites business. For example, I closed Azrites Solicitors, transferred the business to Azrites International. So I wanted to adjust the branding in order to make room for a visual hammer. Also, I was introducing a new brand, Brand Tuned, to offer coaching and mentoring services on marketing and branding. So adding a visual hammer to the Azrites brand seemed basically the right time to do. There were changes to the solicitors' regulation authority rules that allowed solicitors to run non-regulated law firms. We no longer handle full-scale litigation in court proceedings. Anyway, I wanted to adjust the branding purely because I wanted to actually add a visual hammer. And I thought, let me make this final change and then I won't touch the branding anymore. Now, as the designer I'd used in 2014 for the rebranding hadn't found a basis for an icon, despite starting with a completely clean slate, I decided to brief a new designer to create an icon to fit with the existing Azrites logo. Predictably enough, given designers' tendency to want to start with a completely clean slate, the designer promptly announced that he thought it was a bad idea to tack on new elements to existing brand designs. He wanted to create a completely new brand, new logo, new fonts, new colouring, the lot. However, he waited till I'd already paid him half the money to make this announcement. Now, I did not want to completely rebrand. I had assumed that by explaining upfront that I only wanted a visual hammer, he'd taken on board the brief in good faith. He advised that he needed to find a meaningful reason for an icon, and he couldn't think of one. So I suggested he try a sextant for various reasons. This is an instrument for measuring distances between objects, especially in navigation. He came up with some designs which didn't work with the existing logo, so would have necessitated a new logo. However, a bigger problem was that when we did availability searches on the sextant logo, we found an Italian law firm which was using a sextant in their logo. They were actually called sextant. So whenever availability searches throw up a problem such as this one, I advise clients to consider their appetite for risk. Either accept the risk and set aside a contingency budget for litigation, or if you want to avoid a dispute, then choose a different design. Personally, I had no desire to get into a trademark dispute with anyone, so I opted for the latter route. Given the designer's real agenda was to rebrand us, there didn't seem any point in continuing to use him, so I parted company from him. Coming up with a visual hammer was something I decided I would tackle myself with the help of a talented young designer, Iva Nicalo, who helps me with ad hoc design work. She's happy to implement my ideas, which is exactly what I wanted after my frustrating experiences trying to get visual hammers to add to my logo. I remembered the bull icon we had previously used had actually been chosen to denote branding. It was the reason the cover of my book uses cattle too. This led to the idea of a ram as an icon to signify branding. You see, rams reflect strength, the power to overcome and achieve breakthroughs. They denote action, the fifth element of heroism. When you bear in mind that I'm an Aries, the star sign of which is associated with a ram, it seemed a perfect fit to use a ram as the basis of our icon. Ivor did a great job of creating a friendly looking ram icon. Here is the logo now. It fits perfectly with the existing Azrites logo, although I am going to make one final change, and that's to the colouring. But in any event, I took the opportunity to reinstate our tagline because it is actually a bad idea to hardwire your positioning into a tagline. Lawyers for the digital world may have been a unique positioning back in 2014, but in an increasingly digital world, it soon dates. That's why it's generally advisable to not reflect your positioning in a tagline. What made the ram icon even more perfect was that there were no conflicts with any existing logo registrations by law firms or branding agencies. Meaningless distinctiveness. You see, as BrandTuned is an endorsed brand, it needed its own separate branding, albeit one that can sit well with the Azrites branding. So when it came to choosing what to create as an icon for BrandTuned, I opted for meaningless distinctiveness, guided by the research by Byron Sharp and his team at the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. So I chose an owl. It has no rationale for it whatsoever, and Ivor then produced an icon. Here it is sitting alongside the BrandTuned logo. Personally, I think you can always make up a story to explain why you use a particular symbol anyway after you've chosen something. So it makes the choosing much easier to not worry about meaningful differentiation, meaning in your icon. So if you believe you do need a reason for your choice of icon, then by all means make up a story around it once you've chosen a suitable object to use as the basis of the design. If my experience is anything to go by, it is extremely difficult for business owners to achieve the branding they want and to build distinctive assets gradually. Designers are too quick to suggest a new logo or to want to tinker with them, and even to completely change your whole brand identity. Romaniuk's book demonstrates that rebranding or brand refreshes are rarely the answer, even to brand performance issues. She suggests sticking with your assets, even if consumers describe the brand as old-fashioned. The brand assets themselves are rarely a driver of weakening brand image or sales decline. We're living in interesting times when it comes to branding because, as Romaniuk's opening remarks in her books put it, despite advances in our understanding of how the brain, memory and buyer behavior work, much of the advice on building a strong brand identity is tied up to folklore, pop psychology, or based on out-of-date brand strategies. Books on the topic tend to see brand identity as a design exercise with aesthetics at the core of choices. The more I've learnt about the world of marketing and branding, the more I've actually realised just how much bullshit is out there. According to Mark Ritson, who consults with many of the world's big brands and is a professor of marketing and a Marketing Week columnist, 90% of marketers and brand managers have no training in marketing and don't know what they're doing. That's a frightening statistic. So beware if you're looking for a marketer or branding consultant to help with your branding. Make sure you choose one who reads the new information emerging about marketing science and who updates their methods accordingly. I've had to understand what branding involves because I'm writing a book on it. Most business owners do not know who to believe and what the right approach is when branding their business, and can be held back by using the wrong professionals. You know, the brand assets you create have intrinsic value to the consumer, and you lose custom if your potential customers can't readily recognize you. In the next video, I will discuss distinctive brand assets in terms of some of the considerations to take into account when deciding how to design your brand identity.